Shabbat Shalom. Good morning and welcome to the Liberal Jewish Synagogue, whether you are in the sanctuary or participating online on Zoom, YouTube, or Facebook. And a synagogue has three main functions and three names in rabbinic literature. Beit Atfilah, the house of prayer, Beit Midrash, the house of study, and Beit Knesset. And the Beit Knesset, the house of gathering. And the first two have been present throughout the pandemic because online we can lead prayers online, we can lead classes and educational courses online, but the last function, the function of gathering in a community, has been suffering a bit. And yesterday night, during the service, there were a lot of cheering. And my only hope was that it was the cheering for the return to in-person gatherings of the synagogue. And we have a significant number, or not as full as it used to be, but enough to feel a sense of community in person. And I have to say it feels very lovely. And thank you all for coming. And we continue our service, or begin our service, on page 112. Eternal God, a mystery surrounds my life. What comes before it and what lies beyond it are shrouded in darkness. But in the darkness is your presence, and in the mystery your love. No mind can grasp the splendor of your being. No tongue express the majesty of your works. Yet there are times when we sense the reality that is beyond our mortal sight. May this Sabbath be such time for us. Help us to hear your voice, to find your image in our souls, and to be at peace. ברוך שאמר והיה עולם, ברוך הוא. ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם, המהולל בפי עמו, משובח ומפואר בלשון חסידיו ועבדיו, בשבחות ובזמירות, נגדלך ונמליכך מלכנו, יחיד חי העולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, מלך מהולל ותשבחות.
אני מזמירת בשירי ואהוג, כי אליך נפשי תהרוג. נפשי חיכה בצל ידיך, לדעת כל חסדיך. מדברי בכבודך, ובליבי אדודך. אם ירוב נזיחי עליך, נפשי
ישתבח שמך לעד מלכנו, האל המלך הגדול והקדוש בשמיים ובארץ. כי לך נאה אדוני אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו שיר ושבחה, הלל וזמרה, ברכות והודאות מעתה ועד עולם. ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בשירי זמרה. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו מלך העולם, יוצר אור ובורא חושך, עושה שלום וברא את הכל, המאיר לארץ ולדרים עליה ברחמים, ובטובו מחדש בכל יום תמיד מעשה וראשית. מה רבו מעשיך אדוני, כולם בחוכמה עשית, מלאה הארץ קנייניך. יתברך אדוני אלוהינו על שבח מעשי ידיך, ועל מאורי אור שעשית יפארו הסלע. ברוך אתה אדוני, יוצר המאורות. Great is your love for us, eternal God, and abundant your compassion. Our ancestors trusted in you, and you taught them the laws of life. So be gracious to us and teach us. Incline our hearts to hear your words, to know and understand, to learn and teach, and with love to uphold the truths of your Torah. Enlighten us with your teaching, make us faithful to your commandments, and wholehearted in the love and awe of your name. For in love you summon us to serve you and proclaim your unity. We praise you, O God. In love you have called your people Israel to serve you. As it is tradition at the LGS, I invite you please to stand for the Shema. Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם, בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך, ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם להות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך.
למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל מצוותיי, והייתם קדושים לאלוהיכם. אני אדוני אלוהיכם, אשר הוצאתי אתכם מארץ מצרים, להיות לכם לאלוהים. אני אדוני
Good and beautiful and true. Sound, established and enduring are these words, now and forever. True it is, Eternal One, that you are our sovereign God and Redeemer, as you were the God and Redeemer of our ancestors. You are our Maker, the rock of our salvation. We have known you always as our helper and our liberator. There is no God but you. Truly you are first and you are last. We have no Redeemer but you. You redeemed us from Egypt and freed us from the house of bondage. Then with great joy, Moses, Miriam, and all Israel together sang to you this song.
מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדע בקודש. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדע בקודש. מי כמוך באלים אדוני, מי כמוך נדע בקודש. מי
שירה חדשה שיבחו גאולים, לשמך על שפת הים. יחד כולם הודו והמליכו ואמרו, אדוני ימלוך לעולם ועד. צור ישראל, קומה בעזרת ישראל, גואלנו אדוני צבאות שמו, קדוש ישראל, ברוך אתה אדוני, גאל ישראל. אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך. אדוני שפתי תפתח ופי יגיד תהילתך. ברוך אתה אדוני, אלוהינו ואלוהי אבותינו ואמותינו, אלוהי אברהם, אלוהי יצחק, אלוהי יעקב, אלוהי שרה, אלוהי רבקה, אלוהי רחל ואלוהי לאה, האל הגדול, הגיבור והנורא, אל עליון, גם גומל חסדים טובים וקונה הכל, וזוכר חסדי אבות ואימהות, ומביא גאולה לבני בניהם למען שמו ואהבה. מלך חוזר ומושיע ומגן, ברוך אתה אדוני, מגן אברהם ועזרת שרה.
אתה גיבור לעולם אדוני, מחייב איתי מטה, רב להושיע, משיב הרוח ומוריד הגשם, מזריח השמש ומוריד הטל, וכלכל חיים וחסד, מחייב איתי ברחמים רבים. סומך נופלים ואחרי חולים
את שמך בעולם, כשם שמקדישים אותו בשמם, ככתוב על יד נביאך, ככתוב על יד נביאך. קדוש, 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 אדוני צבאות, מלוך כל הארץ, כבודו, כבודו מלא עולם, ברוך כבוד אדוני במקומו. ממקומך מלכנו תופיע, ותמלוך עלינו, כמחכים אנחנו לך, כמחכים אנחנו לך. ימלוך אדוני לעולם, אלוהיך ציון, לדור ודור. Hallelujah.
לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד קוד לך. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד קוד לך. ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך, קדושתך נקדיש. ולנצח נצחים, ולנצח נצחים, קדושתך, קדושתך נקדיש. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד קוד לך. לדור ודור, לדור ודור, לדור ודור נגיד קוד לך. בשטחך אלוהינו ליבנו לא ימוש, לא ימוש, לא יבוא. בשטחך אלוהינו ליבנו לא ימוש, לא ימוש לעולם ועד.
ברוך אתה אדוני, האל הקדוש. You inspired our ancestors to hallow this day for your service. When upon its coming we pause to contemplate our life, we learn anew that we do not live by bread alone, but also by the spiritual nourishment we receive when we open ourselves to your influence. We thank you for the Sabbath day and for the opportunity it offers to enhance the quality of our lives. We thank you for its joy and for its peace. May our worship help us to take into our hearts its message of holiness and consecrate all our days by devotion to what is true, beautiful, and good. ישמחו במלכותך שומרי שבת וקוראי עונג. עם מקדשי שביעי כולם ישבעו ויתענגו מטובך. והשביעי רצית בו וקידשתו. חמדת ימים אותו קראת, זכר למעשה בראשית. Our God and God of our ancestors, may our rest on this day be pleasing in your sight. Sanctify us for your commandments and make us loyal to your teaching. Satisfy us with your goodness, gladden us with your salvation, and purify our hearts to serve you in truth. In your gracious love, Eternal One, let the holiness of your Sabbath enter our hearts, and may all Israel who hallow your name be exalted by its peace. We praise you, O God, for the holiness of the Sabbath. רצה אדוני אלוהינו בעמך ישראל, ותפילתם באהבה תקבל. ותהי לרצון תמיד עבודת ישראל עמך. ברוך אתה אדוני, שעודך לבדך ביראה נעבוד. We give thanks that you, Eternal One, are our God, as you were the God of our ancestors. You are the rock of our life, the power that shields us in every age. We thank and praise you for our lives which are in your hand, for our souls which are in your keeping, for the signs of your presence we encounter every day, and for your wondrous gifts at all times, morning, noon, and night. We praise you, O God, source of goodness, to whom our thanks are due. שים שלום, טובה וברכה, חן וחסד ורחמים, עלינו ועל כל ישראל עמך. ברכנו אבינו כולנו כאחד באור פניך. כי באור פניך נתת לנו, אדוני אלוהינו, תורת חיים, ואהבת חסד, וצדקה, וברכה, ורחמים, וחיים, ושלום. וטוב בעיניך לברך את עמך ישראל, ואת כל העמים, בכל עת ובכל שעה, בשלומך. ברוך אתה אדוני, עושה השלום. We praise you, O God, the source of peace. Let's take a few moments for silent prayer and private meditation, personal reflections.
יהיו לרצונים רפי, והגיון ליבי לפניך. אדוני צורי וגואלי, וגואלי.
Shabbat Shalom, if you've just joined us online. And once again, a very warm welcome to all of you in the sanctuary today, particularly those of you visiting for the first time. And I want to welcome particularly Emily and James, who are going to have a special blessing before their marriage later on in the service, your families, and Rabbi Dr. Jackie Tabik, my colleague from West Central Synagogue, together with your president and Ariel and Jules. Very warm welcome to you as well. We continue with our Torah service, which, if you're following in the prayer book, is on page 490, and I invite you to stand as we open the ark. Whoops. Two of us are here.
Shalom.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Echad Eloheinu, Gadol Adonenu, Kadosh Shemo. Lecha Adonai HaGadol, HaTiferet, HaNetzach VaHod, Ki chol bashamayim u'ba'aretz, Ki chol bashamayim u'ba'aretz, Lecha Adonai HaMamlecha, HaMitnas
Please be seated. Our Torah reading today is Parashat Chukat from the book of Numbers, the fourth book in the Torah. And this collection of stories, which begin in Numbers chapter 20, represent a watershed, both in a literal sense and a metaphorical sense. In this Sedra, Miriam and Aaron, the sister and brother of Moses, are to breathe their last, and Moses, in a desperate attempt to quieten the Israelites who complain that they lack water, strikes the rock twice to bring forth water and earns God's disapprobation. He will not lead the congregation into the promised land. In chapter 21, less well known than the story of Moses hitting the rock, we read of yet a further complaint, once again about the lack of food and water. The Israelites have come to loathe the special food that is provided for them by God, the manna, and they call it lechem haklokel, which means something like the light food. It's obviously not very nourishing. It comes from a Hebrew word meaning light. I wondered whether it was more like the detestable food, but I think it just doesn't nourish them. It just has no meatiness, if I can put it like that. Well, this time, as a punishment for their complaints, God sends fiery serpents that bite the people so that they die. And the people ask God to intercede on behalf of them, to take away the serpents. God then instructs Moses to set up a copper serpent or a bronze serpent on a standard, and anyone who looks at that bronze serpent will recover. And this will remind you of the symbol of the serpent as a symbol of healing and curing, still a symbol today, symbol of recovery. It's still a symbol today in the medical profession. You can envisage the symbol of the snake curled around a pole. So the deadly snake, the image of the deadly snake, shaped into a copper or bronze form by Moses, becomes the means to heal the people. And one theory, which I read, I'm sure those of you with a more medical background will tell me others, one theory of the use of this symbol of the snake is that when it sheds its skin, the snake goes from a deeply lethargic state to one of rapid activity, symbolizing the power of the human body to convalesce from an illness. But I'm sure that Professor Lantosh, where are you in the congregation, will tell me if I'm wrong about that. Baruchu et Adonai HaMavorach, Baruch Adonai Mavorach Leolam Vaed, Baruch Atah Adonai Eloheinu Melech Haolam, Shebachar banu mikol ha'amim, V'natan lanu et Torato, Baruch Atah Adonai Noten HaTorah. ויסעו מהור ההר דרך ים סוף, לסבוב את ארץ אדום. ותקצר נפש העם בדרך, וידבר העם באלוהים ובמשה, למה העליתונו ממצרים למות במדבר, כי אין לחם ואין מים, ונפשנו קצה בלחם הקלוקל. וישלח אדוני בעם את הנחשים השרפים, וינשכו את העם, וימות עם רב מישראל. יבוא העם אל משה, ויאמרו חטאנו, כי דיברנו באדוני בבך. התפלל אל אדוני, ויסר מעלינו את הנחש. ויתפלל משה בעד העם, ויאמר אדוני אל משה, עשי לך שרף, ושים אותו על נס. והיה כל הנשוך, וראה אותו וחי. ויעש משה נחש נחושת, וישימהו על הנס. והיה אם נשך הנחש את איש, והביט אל נחש הנחושת וחי. ויסעו בני ישראל, ויחנו באובות. ויסעו מאובות, ויחנו באיי העברים, במדבר, אשר על פני מואב, ממזרח השמש. משם נסעו ויחנו בנחל זרד. משם נסעו ויחנו מעבר ארנון, אשר במדבר, היוצא מגבול האמורי, כי ארנון גבול מואב, בין מואב ובין האמורי. על כן יאמר בספר מלחמות אדוני, בספר מלחמות אדוני, את והב בסופה, ואת הנחלים ארנון, ואשד הנחלים, אשר נטע לשבת ונשען לגבול מואב, ומשם בארה, היא הבאר אשר אמר אדוני למשה, אסוף את העם ואתנה להם מים. אז ישיר ישראל את השירה הזאת, עלי באר, ענו לה באר. באר חפרוה שרים, קרוה נדיבי העם, במחוקק ובמשענותם. וממדבר מתנה, וממתנה נחליאל, ומנחליאל במות, ומבמות הגיא, אשר בשדה מואב, ראש הפסגה, ונשקפה על פני הישימון. Then the Israelites journeyed from Mount Hor by way of the Sea of Reeds, skirting around the land of Edom. But the people grew impatient along the way. And the people spoke against God and against Moses. Why have you brought us up out of Egypt to die in the wilderness? For there's no bread and there's no water. And our bodies hate this light bread. I don't know how to translate it. It doesn't translate well. This tasteless, worthless bread. And the Eternal One sent against the people fiery serpents, and they bit the people, and many among the Israelites died. And the people came to Moses, and they said, we have sinned, for we have spoken against the Eternal One and against you. Pray to the Eternal One that he remove from us these serpents. So Moses prayed on behalf of the people. And God said to Moses, make for yourself a fiery serpent, the image of a fiery serpent, and place it upon a pole. And it shall come to pass that anyone who is bitten shall look upon it and live. So Moses made a copper serpent and placed it upon the pole. And it came to pass that if anybody was bitten by a serpent, that person would look upon the copper serpent and live. Now we get a kind of itinerary of the Israelites, of where they went from one stage to the next. So the Israelites journeyed and they encamped in Ovot. Then they continued from Ovot and they encamped at Iyeh HaAvarim in the wilderness, which was opposite the land of Moab, facing east, facing literally the rising of the sun. And from there they continued their journey and encamped in the Wadi Zered. And from there they journeyed and encamped on the other side of Arnon, which is in the wilderness, that comes out of the boundary of the Amorites, the border of the Amorites. For Arnon is on the border of Moab, between Moab and the Amorite country. And so it is said in the book of the Wars of the Eternal One. This is such an extraordinary little piece, a little fragment from a separate book. Ibn Ezra, the medieval commentator, Spanish commentator, believes this is an extract from another book, the Wars of the Eternal One. And we just get this little fragment. Vahev in Sufa, and the streams of Arnon, and the slopes that go down towards the Wadi, which stretches down towards the settled territory of Ar, and continues to the border of Moab. And from there, they came across a well. This is the well of which the Eternal One said to Moses, gather the people and I will give you water. And then we get another little fragment of a song here. Then Israel sang this song, spring up, O well. This is in the tradition of speaking, singing a song to a well for it to bring forth water. Sing to it, O well. Sing to it, the well which the princes dug, which the leaders of the people began to excavate with their maces and with their staffs. Now, it would hardly be the job of the nobles and the princes to dig the wells, but maybe this is a sort of ground laying operation that goes on here, that they make the first symbolic digging of these wells. And then the continuation of the journey from the wilderness to Mattanah, and from Mattanah to Nahaliel, and from Nahaliel to Bamot, and from Bamot into the valley, which was on the plain in the plains of Moab, right on the peak of Mount Pisgah, looking out into the wasteland, Yeshimon, the wasteland. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, shenatan lanu Torat emet, v'chayei olam nata betochenu. Baruch atah Adonai, noten haTorah. And so we turn now to our prophetic reading for this morning, a specially chosen reading from the book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah, who lived through the reigns of the last kings of Judah before the exile. He witnessed the fall of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple in 586 BCE. And interestingly for us, I think, Abraham Joshua Heschel in his book on the prophets says it was a time of emergency, one instant away from a cataclysmic event. Yet in the midst of this time of devastation and his desperate pleas to the people to repent, the prophet is not without compassion and hope, and he is able to envisage a different kind of future. Confined to the prison compound, he speaks words of healing and relief. The people will be restored to their land once again, a symbol of life and hope. The streets will be filled with the sound of gladness, with the voice of the bridegroom and the bride. And so it seems a particularly felicitous and appropriate haftarah to read this Shabbat as we celebrate your forthcoming marriage, Emily and James, an event that heralds life and hope for all of us as we look forward to better times ahead. And invite Alan to read the haftarah.
Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, אשר בחר בנביאים טובים ורצה בדבריכם, חני המרים באמת. ברוך אתה אדוני, הבוחר בתורה ובמשה עבדו, בישראל עמו, ובנביאך אמת בצדק. The word of the Eternal One came to Jeremiah a second time, while he was still confined in the prison compound, as follows. Thus said the Eternal One who is planning it, the Eternal One who is shaping it to bring it about, whose name is the Eternal One. Call to me, and I will answer you, and I will tell you wondrous things, secrets you've not known. For thus said the Eternal One, the God of Israel, concerning the houses of this city and the palaces of the kings of Judah that were torn down for defense against the siege mounds and against the sword, and were filled by those who went to fight the Chaldeans, with the corpses of the men whom I struck down in my anger and rage, hiding my face from this city because of all their wickedness. I'm going to bring her relief and healing. I will heal them and reveal to them abundance of true favor. And I will restore the fortunes of Judah and Israel, and I will rebuild them as of old. And I will purge them of all the sins which they committed against me, and I will pardon all the sins which they committed against me, by which they rebelled against me. And she shall gain through me renown, joy, fame, and glory above all the nations of the earth, when they hear of all the good fortune I provide for them. They will thrill and quiver because of all the good fortune and all the prosperity that I will provide for her. Thus said the Eternal One. Again there shall be heard in this place which you say is ruined, without man or beast, in the towns of Judah and the streets of Jerusalem that are desolate, without people, without inhabitants, without beast. The sound of mirth and gladness, the voice of bridegroom and bride, the voice of those who cry, "Give thanks to the Eternal One of hosts, for the Eternal One is good, for God's goodness is everlasting," as they bring thanksgiving offerings to the house of the Eternal One. "For I will restore the fortunes of the land as of old," said the Eternal One. Al ha-Torah ve'al ha'avodah ve'al ha'nevi'im ve'al yom ha'Shabbat hazeh shenatata lanu Adonai Eloheinu l'kedusha v'limnucha l'kavod u'tifaret al hakol Adonai Eloheinu anachnu modim lach umvachim otach Yitbarach Shimcha b'fi kol hai tamid le'olam va'ed Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh haShabbat. Amen.
Thank you. And I invite now Emily and James to come up to the bima to read the prayers for the royal family, community in Israel. The congregation in the sanctuary, please stand.
Eternal God, whose dominion embraces the universe, we ask your blessing for our sovereign lady, Queen Elizabeth, and all the royal family, for those who govern our country, and all who influence the quality of its national life. Make them conscious of their responsibility and teach them to exercise it in accordance with your will. May we all help to fashion in this country a society that excels in freedom and justice, tolerance and compassion, so that it may be a force for righteousness and peace in the life of humanity.
May the one who blessed our ancestors bless all our brothers and sisters of the house of Israel who enter synagogues to pray and to give aid to those in need. May the Holy One, to whom all praise is due, hear their prayers and help them to fulfill their aspirations for good. Eternal God, shelter of peace for all nations, we ask your blessing on the state of Israel and all who live there. May its leaders strive to be true to its founding principles of freedom, justice, and peace. May its citizens uphold a vision of equality and understanding, removing all fears and healing all wounds. And may we, through our loving attachment to the land, remain unprejudiced and clear in our pursuit of peace and justice. Let peace be found within her walls and safety within her borders. V'yagal k'mayim mishpat, u'tzedakah k'knal adam. Let justice roll down like waters and righteousness like an ever-flowing stream. Amen.
Emily and James, please stay by the reading desk together. It gives me such great pleasure to be able to welcome you both back into the sanctuary, and James particularly to welcome your parents for the first time, Emily to be with your parents and with Henrietta here in the sanctuary, and to have the privilege of reciting a special blessing over your forthcoming marriage. Emily, your family has long been associated with this synagogue, and it is something very special to see generations coming through the portals and celebrating important life cycle milestones in their lives, in your life. And it is a continuation of that long heritage for the Jewish people that I think brings you in here and brings James with you as somebody who's already immersed in Jewish learning in Rabbi Eagle's class. So let me, in anticipation of your marriage in just a few weeks' time, invoke God's blessing upon you all. God, at the quietness of this time and in the holiness of this place, give your blessing to Emily and James. You have given them youth with its hopes and love with its dreams. May these come true through their faith in each other and their trust in you. Let them be devoted to each other, and as the years go by, teach them how great is the joy that comes from sharing, and how deep the love that grows with giving. May your presence, eternal God, dwell among them in the warmth of their love, in the kindness of their home, and in their charity and goodness for others. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha, Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yichunecha, Yisa Adonai panav elecha, Yasem lecha shalom. May God bless you and keep you. May God's face shine upon you and be kind to you. May God reach out to you with tenderness and give you long lives, lives filled with great happiness, with blessing and with peace. And let us all say Amen and Mazal Tov. Their hearts are saying Amen to you. We're not quite at the stage of being able to join in with all the prayers, but we all wish you Mazal Tov. And I invite now your parents, Emily, to come up as we return the scroll to the ark. Stay up, Emily. This is the covenant I will make with the house of Israel in time to come, says the Eternal One. I will put my teaching within them and engrave it on their hearts. I will be their God, and they shall be my people. No longer shall anyone need to teach a friend or a neighbor to know me, for they all shall know me, young and old alike. I should explain that the microphone on the lower bimmer has quietly gone to another place, and that's why we're using the upper bimmer for our prayers and sermon today. But I reassure you that the microphones are all going to be replaced on Tuesday after a good long life. In 1972, following the miners' strike, the government set up an emergency situation centre as part of a review of the management of civil contingencies. In 2004, the Civil Contingencies Act set out responsibilities for different kinds of emergencies at local or national level. Many of us will be familiar with the name of the committee which is convened in response to major incidents or emergencies. It's called COBRA, an acronym which stands for Cabinet Office Briefing Room A. COBRA keeps ministers informed of major or catastrophic emergencies, including natural disasters, terrorist attacks, and major industrial accidents or disruption. In 2020, COBRA met 20 times to discuss the COVID-19 pandemic, its first meeting in January 2020, before any cases of the virus were recorded in the UK. When in March 2020, the LJS, like virtually every other institution, was forced to close its doors, thus effectively closing down all our in-person services and activities, we decided to convene our own COBRA committee, a small group of lead volunteers drawn from our community care group, with Aviva Shafritz, our community care coordinator, and the rabbis, in order to address the question of how to keep our congregation together without being able to meet in person. As the government's COBRA committee was in full flight, we decided that we would name our own emergency gathering after the serpent in this week's Torah portion, the Nachash Nechoshet, the bronze or copper serpent that Moses sets up on a pole as a means of healing the people from the snake bites they've been afflicted with in the desert. Later on in the Book of Kings, we come across a reference to this bronze serpent once again, its healing powers forgotten, and instead the object of idolatrous worship. Hezekiah, the long-serving king of Judah, whose reign spans the end of the 8th and beginning of the 7th centuries BCE, destroys it along with other shrines he deems to be idolatrous. And it is here that we learn the name of this bronze serpent. It was called Nehushtan, the bronze serpent thing. So Nehushtan was the name that Rabbi Igor chose for our own emergency COBRA committee, and which met for the first time towards the end of March 2020, and has continued to meet on Zoom, initially on a weekly basis, and now slightly less frequently. It was reassuring to know that there was a group of experienced volunteers pooling their wisdom and knowledge, helping us to find a way through the pandemic and to find out what the community needed. Members of the committee act as valuable sounding boards. They are in touch with other members of the community, and their responses feed in to many of the decisions we make and continuing to make as we deal with the challenging circumstances of not being able to meet up in person. Our initial meetings record our efforts to get everyone online, from 0 to 103, mainly using Zoom so that they could tap into services, adult education, and all the other events that we began to arrange. And very quickly, we decided to recruit volunteers to ring the whole congregation, from the oldest down to the youngest. We had the most extraordinary response to our request for volunteers. 120 additional volunteers signed up to phone 5, 6, 7, sometimes more congregants. It was, you will remember, a traumatic time. There was great fear and huge uncertainty about how the future would unfold. the daily report of rising deaths and cases of coronavirus was frightening, and isolation and loneliness induced anxiety. By May 2020, we had contacted all congregants over the age of 70 and those under the age of 41, and were beginning to embark on those in the middle. Most of the congregation of those we reached were incredibly grateful for the contact, and for a few, the connections have continued over the year. While most people were doing well and had family and friends who could help out, there were those who were suffering on their own, or with partners or spouses who were unwell and had lost support from outside the home, or were struggling with work and homeschooling for their children. The Nehushtan members turn frequently to Mary Rossiter, one of our lead volunteers in community care and a retired doctor, for behind-the-scenes information from the scientific and medical world. In October, Aviva brought us a paper from the Institute for Jewish Policy Research entitled Hidden Effects: The Mental Health of the UK's Jewish Population During the COVID-19 Pandemic. It was the second in a series of short papers that showed how the pandemic had affected Jews across the UK, and it measured the level of anxiety among Jews before the pandemic and the level of mental well-being among Jews after the pandemic had taken hold. Jews reported having a higher level of anxiety than the general population in 2019. I don't think that's a great surprise to some of us here. While there were periods of calm during 2020 and fewer people reporting frustration, boredom, and anxiety, cases of mental well-being fluctuated as time went on and were determined partly by age, gender, socioeconomic, and other factors. One interesting graph which was produced by the report showed a clear trend with respect to synagogue membership. And I quote here, mental distress is notably higher among those who are not synagogue members than among those who are, in the IJPR report. This may have something to do with age, the researchers thought. Younger people tend not to be members of synagogues and were reported to experience a great deal of mental distress. But, said the report, that doesn't explain the fact that a high proportion of strictly Orthodox members are also aged under 40 and exhibit one of the lowest means of mental distress. Rather worryingly, when the report broke down Jewish denominations into Liberal Judaism, Reform Judaism, Masorti, Orthodox, and ultra-Orthodox, liberal Jews, affiliated liberal Jews, showed a marginally higher degree of mental distress. I wasn't very proud of that figure, but I don't know what the reasons are. Maybe we need to investigate that. So Nehushtan has been a think tank, a forum for developing a way of reassuring the community and bringing, we hope, spiritual tranquility and calm to anxious hearts. It represented our bronze serpent. In looking upon it or being part of this small group, we were able to steady ourselves and perhaps provide a little healing for the congregation. 15 months later, the Nehushtan members are still meeting and wondering when, like Hezekiah, we might be able to say farewell to our own copper serpent and resurrect some of our community events. The extension of the lockdown has meant that many of our activities, our face-to-face activities, have had to remain on hold for the time being. But as those of you who are here today, the synagogue is open for services, and we are tentatively making plans to reopen some of our community activities like the Out and About Club, drop-in for asylum seekers, video and tea, and singing for the mind. It won't happen tomorrow, but I hope over the summer and into the autumn, we will begin to make plans to meet up again in person. After Moses had made the copper serpent and mounted it on a standard, the Israelites are able to be healed from their wounds, and the journey through the wilderness is able to continue stage by stage. Eventually, they arrive at a place called Be'er. The word means a well, and the Torah introduces the fragment of the little song we heard earlier, which is sung to the well itself, Ali Ve'er Enula, spring up, O well, sing to it. After nearly 40 years in the wilderness, without water and proper food, after multiple insurrections and complaints against Moses, Aaron, and God, a pivotal change occurs at this point. Miriam and Aaron have died. Moses, we learn, will not enter the promised land. But the discovery of the well, which the rabbis traced back to Miriam, leads to an outpouring of grateful and celebratory song. The crises have passed, and this well of water, the object of their song, and a means for assuaging the people's thirst, becomes a symbol of life and a transition into a new era. Nothing for us will quite ever be the same, and I don't doubt that nothing will quite be the same as we journey on together, stage by stage. But perhaps we may find our way gently out of this crisis of COVID and find a well of hope and happiness. A wedding such as yours, Emily and James, a bar or bat mitzvah, the birth of a child. Then may we find our voices once again and sing a new song of recovery and hope. Ushavtem mayim besason, mi mayane hayeshua. With joy, may we draw water out of the wells of healing and deliverance. Ken yehi ratzon. May this be God's will, and let us say, Amen. We continue now with our concluding prayers on page 519. Please stand. Baruch Adonai leolam, amen v'amen. Baruch Adonai Elohim, Elohei Yisrael, osei niflaot levado, ubaruch shem kavodo leolam, v'yimalei kavodo et kol haaretz. Amen v'amen. The eternal God shall rule over all the earth. On that day the eternal God shall be one, and known to be one. May your love, O God, rest upon us, as we rest our hope in you. All the nations you have made shall come and bow down before you and honor your name. Let God be praised by day. Let God be praised by night. Let God be praised when we lie down. Let God be praised when we rise up. Avinu shebashamayim, yached shimcha, v'kayem malchutecha tamid, u'meloch aleinu, leolam va'ed. Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Yimloch, Leolam Va'ed.
ונאמר והיה אדוני למלך על כל הארץ ביום ההוא יהיה אדוני אחד ביום ההוא יהיה
The growing good of the world is partly depend on unhistoric acts, and that things are not so ill with you and me as they might have been, is half owing to the number who lived faithfully a hidden life and rest in unvisited tombs. Even when they are gone, the departed are with us. They inspire us to live as, in their higher moments, they themselves sought to live. We remember them now. They remain in our hearts. They are a continual blessing. And on this Shabbat, we remember with affection and gratitude the lives of all those who died at this time of the year in years gone by. And remember especially David Banks, Ralph Black, Jerry Braun, Ezra Chaba Cohen, Rochelle Cohen, Anton Friedinger, Jack Glassberg, Yetta Kane, Richard Kravitz, Bessie Lazarus, Gerald Lee, Frida Levitt, Eve Lobel, Elsie Slow, Norman Tobin, Margaret Van Sommeren, and Margot Weinberg. Now pause for a few moments if any of you in the sanctuary or at home wish to add to those names, please do so now. Zichronam Livracha, may all that was dear and good in their lives endure always as a blessing. As we say the words of the Kaddish, Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei Rabbah, ve'alma divrach yerutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon v'yomechon, v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, v'galau v'zman hariv, v'imru amen. Yehei shemei Rabbah mevarach le'alam al almei almaya, Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ah v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, v'yitada v'yitale v'talal shemei l'kudusha b'richu, le'ela min kol bechata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, jamiran v'yalma v'imru amen. Yehei shalama rabba min shamaya v'chayim, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'mromav, hu ya'aseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael, v'al kol b'nei Adam, v'imru amen. May the Most High, source of perfect peace, grant peace to us, to all Israel, and to all humanity, and let us say, Amen. Please be seated. It is lovely to see so many of you here in the sanctuary. Those of you who've come to celebrate, and those of you who've come at special times of the year to remember loved ones. A very warm welcome to all of you. A very warm welcome to all of you who've joined us online today. Please stay with us if you're online, as Igor and I are going to make Kiddush at the end of the service here in a little experiment in the sanctuary. So the details of how to join Kiddush will come up at the very end of the PowerPoint presentation. And those of you in the sanctuary, we invite you to stay, to sit down at the end of the service and to stay if you wish. And I hope there'll be a little bit of wine for you as you leave the synagogue. So I want to say thank you to you, Max, for being our wonderful camera operator today. A new role that we've devised, and a huge thank you to our stewards as well, who marshal you all in a safe way and will help you to leave as well, though I'm sure you won't need that. And thank you as well to our musicians who led the music so beautifully today. Just a few announcements. We have a special lecture on Tuesday evening, which is actually a member of my Hebrew class. Professor Tom Selwyn is going to give a talk entitled Two Women of Bethlehem, listening to Rachel and Ruth about separation and sharing. Some of us have been studying the book of Ruth, and Professor Selwyn's very kindly offered to give a special lecture, and that will be at 7 p.m. till 8, so that's 1 hour. If you wish to join the Zoom class, please email Debbie Penhay or just contact the synagogue and it will be given to you. Our annual general meeting is on Wednesday evening. I urge you all to join on Zoom. We need to be 40 people to be quorate, so this is a plea from the honorary officers and from the council. Please, will you join? Our guest speaker is Rabbi Charlie Baginski, Chief Executive of Liberal Judaism, and she's going to be talking on, if I can remember the subject, a quotation from the book of Ecclesiastes, 3 are better than 2, or 2 are better than 1, I can't remember now. But anyway, she's going to be talking about how we can work closely together, Liberal Judaism and the Liberal Jewish Synagogue. So that's going to be an interesting evening, as well as, of course, hearing from our outgoing treasurer, Peter Lobel, all about the accounts. We're planning a picnic, a community picnic on the 3rd of July. Please look at the website and Shalom LJS, our twice-weekly newsletter, for more details, which we will communicate with you. And for those of you who enjoy learning, there are classes over the summer leading up to Tisha B'Av, the fast of Av. You need to register early through Leo Beck College's Lair House. Please go to their website to see what they offer for the summer and also for next term as well. They're the rabbinical training seminary, but they open their doors, and all of this is online at the moment, to non-rabbinical scholars as well, people who just want to learn, and they have a huge range of courses. Have I forgotten anything? No? So we will conclude our service with Adonai.
Adon Olam Hashem Allah, B'Telem Kol Yitzir Nivra, Le'nasa B'Hefto Kol, Azai Melech Shemo Yikra,
Rabbi Dr. Jackie Tabbick from West Central Liberal Synagogue to give the closing blessing. Please stand.
And can I say, first of all, thank you so much to my lovely colleagues for inviting us and allowing us to share today with your wonderful congregation. We are very grateful that you allowed us to take up some of your precious seats here on a Shabbat morning. Within God's hands, we place our souls, both when we sleep and when we wake. With our souls, our bodies too, God is with us. We should not fear. Blessed were you when you came in. May God's blessings go with you as you leave. Adonai oz le'amor yitain, Adonai yavarech et amo v'shalom. May God bless us, his people, and indeed the whole world, with the blessings of strength to get through this difficult period, and give us a blessing of peace, both physically and, as you mentioned, peace of mind. And I wish you all Shabbat Shalom.